Arjun's hands tightened on his delivery bike's handlebars as he entered one of the city's problem areas, where abandoned houses and broken dreams lined the streets. When he pulled up for his delivery, he expected nothing out of the ordinary. But the young girl who opened the door made his blood run cold. Her trembling hands covered in blood-stained latex gloves, a stained hot water bottle clutched tightly to her chest, and something darker lurking in her frightened eyes, told him this was anything but routine. What Arjun would uncover that day would show him a side of his city he never knew existed, one where desperate souls had been forgotten by everyone who should have cared. Before we dive in, comment below where you're watching or listening from today, and if you like this shocking story, don't forget to subscribe. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bustling streets of Millbrook as Arjun Mehra raced towards Frank's Pizza, his heart pounding in his chest. He was late, and on his first day no less. The weight of his responsibilities at home pressed heavily on his mind as he pushed himself to run faster, dodging pedestrians and weaving through parked cars. As he burst through the doors of Frank's Pizza, the smell of freshly baked dough and melted cheese hit him like a wave. Arjun bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. The small family-owned pizzeria was empty, save for a stern-looking man behind the counter, his arms crossed, and a scowl etched deeply into his face. "You must be Arjun," the man said, his voice as cold as the walk-in freezer behind him. "I'm Gerald, the manager. You're late." Arjun straightened up, still panting slightly. "I'm so sorry, sir. Gerald cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "I don't want to hear excuses. When you work for me, you show up on time, period. This isn't a good start, kid." Arjun felt his face flush with embarrassment and frustration. He wanted to explain about his mother, about how he had to make sure she had her medication and lunch prepared before he left. But Gerald's icy stare made it clear that explanations weren't welcome. "I understand, sir. It won't happen again," Arjun said, swallowing his pride. Gerald's eyes narrowed. "See that it doesn't. Now get your uniform on. You've got a delivery to make." As Arjun changed into the red and white Frank's Pizza polo shirt, he could hear Gerald muttering under his breath about kids these days and no work ethic. He gritted his teeth, reminding himself why he needed this job. His mother's medical bills weren't going to pay themselves. When Arjun emerged from the back room, Gerald thrust a warm pizza box into his hands. "Small margarita to 357 Willow Lane," he said gruffly. Then, his voice dropping to a near whisper, he added, "Word of advice, kid. That area's rough. Just deliver and go. Don't hang around, don't ask questions. Got it?" Arjun nodded, a bit taken aback by the sudden change in Gerald's tone. "Yes, sir. Deliver and go, I understand." As he headed out the door, pizza in hand, Arjun couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his stomach. It wasn't just Gerald's warning. There was something in the way he'd said it, a hint of... what? Fear? Concern? Whatever it was, it made Arjun's first delivery feel more like a foreboding journey than a simple pizza run. The sun was setting as Arjun mounted his motorbike, casting an orange glow over the town. As he drove towards Willow Lane, he tried to focus on the positives. He had a job now, a way to help his mother. Things were looking up, weren't they? But as the well-maintained streets of downtown gave way to more neglected neighborhoods, Arjun couldn't help but wonder what exactly he was riding into. The transition from the bustling main streets to the eerie quiet of Willow Lane was jarring. As Arjun pedaled his bike down the cracked and weed-infested sidewalk, he felt as if he'd crossed some invisible boundary into a forgotten part of town. The houses here stood like silent sentinels, their paint peeling and yards overgrown, windows dark and uninviting. Gerald's warning echoed in Arjun's mind as he approached 357 Willow Lane. The house seemed to shrink away from the street, its weathered siding a patchwork of faded colors. The front yard was a tangle of knee-high grass and dandelions, punctuated by rusted lawn ornaments half buried in the weeds. Arjun dismounted his bike, the pizza box warm against his side. He took a deep breath, steeling himself as he made his way up the weed-choked path to the front door. The porch creaked ominously under his feet, and he found himself wondering if it would hold his weight. "Pizza delivery," Arjun called out, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the stillness of the neighborhood. No response came from within the house. He waited a moment, then tried again. "Delivery for Sophie." Still nothing. Arjun shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do next. He glanced back at his bike, considering whether he should just leave the pizza and go, but something held him back. A nagging feeling that he couldn't quite place. Just as he was about to turn and leave, the door creaked open. A young girl peered out, her small face partially hidden behind the door. She looked disheveled, her clothes stained and her hair a tangled mess. Her eyes darted nervously, never quite meeting Arjun's gaze. As the door opened wider, a sharp, unpleasant odor wafted out. It was a strange mix of bleach, something metallic, and an earthy smell like wet soil. Arjun's nose wrinkled involuntarily. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, concern overriding his initial discomfort. "Have you been cooking something?" The girl mumbled a quiet no, her eyes still avoiding his. Arjun hesitated, torn between his growing unease and his desire to help. But before he could say anything more, the girl quickly took the pizza box from his hands and retreated inside, closing the door with a soft click. For a moment, Arjun stood there, staring at the closed door. The encounter left him feeling unsettled, a knot of worry forming in his stomach. As he turned to leave, movement caught his eye. In the window of the neighboring house, an old man stood watching him, his gaze blank and unsettling. Arjun paused, considering whether to approach the neighbor. Maybe he knew something about the girl's situation. But Gerald's words came back to him. "Don't ask questions, just deliver and go." With a heavy sigh, Arjun walked back to his motorbike. As he mounted and started the engine, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving something important behind. The weight of the old man's stare followed him down the street, a reminder of the strange encounter that would linger long after he'd left Willow Lane behind. The ride back to Frank's Pizza was a blur for Arjun. His mind kept replaying the scene at 357 Willow Lane, the girl's nervous demeanor, the strange smell, and the unsettling stare of the old man next door. He found himself glancing back towards Willow Lane more than once, a nagging feeling of unease settling in his gut. As he pulled into the parking lot of Frank's Pizza, Arjun tried to shake off the lingering doubts. He had done his job, delivered the pizza as instructed. That should be the end of it, right? But even as he tried to convince himself, he couldn't quite let go of the worry gnawing at him. The bell above the door jingled as Arjun stepped back into the pizzeria. Gerald was at the counter, phone pressed to his ear, his usual gruff expression in place. "One small margarita, anything else, no? Okay, we'll deliver your order to you as soon as possible." "Yes, 357 Willow Lane," Gerald was saying, jotting down the order details. Arjun froze, his eyes widening at the familiar address. Gerald hung up the phone and turned to him with a raised eyebrow. "Another small margarita for 357 Willow Lane," Gerald said, his tone indicating he found it odd as well. Was it a young girl on the phone?" Arjun asked hesitantly. Gerald shrugged. "Sounded more like an older woman to me. Why?" Arjun hesitated, torn between his instinct to share his concerns and Gerald's earlier warning not to ask questions. "It's just, when I was there earlier, a little girl answered the door. Something seemed off about her. There was this smell." "People from that area are known for being strange," Gerald cut him off, waving a dismissive hand. "Just deliver the pizza and don't worry about their cleanliness." Arjun nodded slowly, trying to process this information. If an adult had called this time, maybe he had been worrying over nothing. Perhaps the girl wasn't alone after all. As Gerald headed to the kitchen to prepare the pizza, Arjun found himself lost in thought. The pieces didn't quite fit together, but he couldn't put his finger on why. He watched from the window as Gerald efficiently assembled the margarita, his movements quick and practiced. Once the pizza was ready, Gerald carefully packed it into a box and placed it in an insulated bag. He handed it to Arjun with a firm reminder. The caller specifically requested this one to be delivered quickly. Remember, just deliver the pizza and get back here. Sensing Arjun's lingering discomfort, Gerald attempted to lighten the mood with a joke. Hey, if something happens to that delivery bike because you hung around too long, you'll be paying me for it, he said with a smirk. Arjun didn't laugh, the joke falling flat against his growing apprehension. As he left the shop with the pizza, he felt caught between Gerald's instructions and his own unease. The weight of the warm pizza box in his hands seemed to grow heavier with each step, a physical reminder of the conflict brewing inside him. As he mounted his motorbike once more, Arjun couldn't shake the feeling that he was riding back into something he didn't fully understand. The journey back to Willow Lane felt different this time. The hot morning sun cast long shadows across the street, and every rustle of leaves in the breeze made Arjun's heart skip a beat. As he approached 357 Willow Lane, the sense of dread that had been building since his first visit intensified. The house looked even more pale in the daylight, its weathered exterior a patchwork of peeling paint and neglect. Arjun's feet felt heavy as he walked up the overgrown path, pizza box in hand. Gerald's advice to just deliver and go echoed in his mind, but it was drowned out by the memory of the girl's anxious face and the unsettling atmosphere that surrounded the house. Arjun rang the doorbell and called, "Frank Pizza's delivery," his finger trembling slightly as he pressed the button. To his surprise, he heard footsteps thudding in a rush from inside, and the door opened almost immediately. The girl from before stood there, but her appearance made Arjun's blood run cold. Her clothes were now stained with what looked like fresh bloodstains and vomit. In her small hands, covered by latex gloves that glistened red and wet, she clutched a hot water bottle tightly in her chest. "Here's your pizza, miss," he said with a nod. The girl took the warm box from his hand, and he noticed a thin streak of blood that had soaked into the cardboard surface. "Hey, is everything all right?" Arjun asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He tried to peer past her into the house, looking for any sign of an adult. "Is anyone hurt inside?" The girl's eyes darted to the side, her body language screaming discomfort and fear. But before Arjun could press further, she suddenly closed the door, the sound of her retreating footsteps fading quickly. Arjun stood there, frozen in indecision. Every instinct told him something was terribly wrong, but Gerald's warning held him back. He turned away reluctantly, telling himself to respect the instructions he'd been given and not get involved. He had only made it halfway down the path when a gust of wind blew through, carrying with it the creak of the door. Arjun turned back to see that the door had swung open slightly, left ajar. In that moment, Arjun felt the full weight of his moral dilemma. Should he follow Gerald's warning and leave, protecting his job and staying out of what could be a dangerous situation? Or should he trust his instincts and investigate, potentially helping someone in dire need? The memory of his sick mother back at home, the girl's fearful eyes and the strange conditions inside the house flooded back to him. He couldn't shake the feeling that if he left now, he might be abandoning someone who desperately needed help. Taking a deep breath, Arjun made his decision. He stepped cautiously toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest. "Hello, excuse me," he called out softly as he crossed the threshold. "Little girl?" As he peeked inside, Arjun knew he was potentially stepping into something he wasn't fully prepared for. But the need to ensure the girl's safety outweighed his fear. Whatever lay beyond that door, he was now committed to seeing it through. The moment Arjun stepped over the threshold, he was assaulted by an overwhelming stench that made him gag. It was a rancid mixture of rot, old food, and something sharper, like bleach. The odor was so intense that he instinctively pulled his uniform collar over his nose, trying to block out the worst of it. As his eyes adjusted to the dim interior, Arjun found himself in a narrow hallway, barely lit by a flickering bulb overhead. The space was cramped, filled to bursting with piles of newspapers, old magazines, and miscellaneous junk. Broken furniture and cardboard boxes created a maze-like path through the clutter. Arjun felt a wave of claustrophobia wash over him, The piles of hoarded items towered above him, making the already small space feel suffocating. Every available surface was buried under layers of random objects, some covered in a thick layer of dust, others bearing signs of recent use. Carefully, he sidestepped peered around a teetering stack of yellowed newspapers, calling out softly, "Sophie, hello?" His voice sounded small and muffled in the oppressive silence of the house. The smell intensified as he moved deeper into the house, becoming so potent that it made his eyes water. He pressed his collar tighter against his nose, but it did little to combat the assault on his senses. Nausea rose in his throat, a combination of the foul air and the unsettling surroundings. Arjun edged into what appeared to be the living room, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it could be heard echoing off the cluttered walls. The room was in a state of chaotic disarray, with just enough light filtering through the drawn curtains to reveal the extent of the hoarding. Old stained furniture sat buried under discarded blankets, clothing, and more boxes. It was hard to tell how long this space had been left in this state of decay. The air felt heavy, thick with neglect, and something darker that Arjun couldn't quite place. As he scanned the room, trying to make sense of the chaos, an open door caught his eye. In the corner, partially obscured by a mountain of clutter, was a bed. And on that bed, Arjun's breath caught in his throat as he realized what he was seeing. An elderly man lay motionless on the bed, his skin waxy and pale in the dim light. Dried blood stained his mouth and eyes, and as Arjun forced himself to look closer, he saw yellowed bodily fluids seeping from the man's nostrils, ears, and mouth. "Excuse me, I'm sorry." Arjun's voice trailed off as the full horror of the situation hit him. With trembling fingers, he reached out to check for a pulse, but the skin was cold to the touch. There was no breath, no sign of life. The elderly man on the bed was unmistakably dead, his body showing signs of having been there for at least a couple of days. The smell of decay that permeated the house suddenly made terrible sense. Arjun stumbled back, his stomach churning violently. He pressed his hand harder against his mouth and nose, fighting the urge to vomit. The reality of what he had discovered, a dead body, left to decompose in this cluttered, neglected house, was almost too much to bear. Just as he was about to turn and flee, a loud, raspy, whooping cough echoed from a nearby room. The sound, weak but unmistakable, snapped Arjun back to his senses. There was still someone alive and in need of help. Despite his fear and revulsion, Arjun knew he couldn't leave now. With a deep breath, Arjun steeled himself and turned away from the grim scene on the bed. He followed the sound of the cough, pushing through the narrow, cluttered path toward its source, each step feeling like a battle against his own instincts. As he moved deeper into the house, the reality of the situation weighed heavily on him. This was no longer about delivering a pizza or even checking on a customer. He had stumbled into a tragedy, a family in crisis that had been hidden away from the world. Whatever lay ahead, Arjun knew his actions in the next few moments could make a life-changing difference. With this sobering thought, he approached the door from which the cough had come. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the handle, unsure of what he would find on the other side, but determined to face it. Taking one last steadying breath, Arjun opened the door, ready to confront whatever awaited him. The door creaked open, revealing a scene that would be forever etched in Arjun's memory. The room was small and cramped, its walls covered in peeling wallpaper. Piles of unwashed laundry littered the floor, mingling with empty medicine bottles and discarded food wrappers. The air was thick with a stale, musty odor that added to the oppressive atmosphere of neglect and poverty. In the center of this chaos, illuminated by the weak light of a bedside lamp, was a worn, sagging bed where an elderly woman lay. Undoubtedly, the girl's grandmother. Her face was pale and drawn, her breathing shallow and labored. Beside her sat the young girl from the doorway, carefully placing a hot water bottle on her grandmother's frail form. Arjun notices her trying to feed her grandmother small pieces of pizza, breaking off bits and bringing them to her grandmother's lips with trembling hands. After each attempt, she takes small bites herself, trying to stay nourished. The sight of a young child acting as a caregiver with nothing more than a pizza to sustain them, sends a wave of compassion and horror through him. Sophie looked up as Arjun entered, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She instinctively pulled back, clutching the pizza box she had taken earlier as if it were a shield. "Please don't hurt me," she cried out, her voice trembling. "I don't have anything. Just take what you want and go." The raw panic in her voice struck Arjun to his core. He immediately raised his hands, speaking in the softest, most reassuring tone he could muster. "I'm not here to hurt you, Sophie. I'm the delivery guy. I just want to help." He took a step back, giving her space, trying to show that he meant no harm. Gradually, the fear in Sophie's eyes began to subside, replaced by a wary curiosity. "My name's Sophie," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And this is my grandmother, Evelyn." Arjun nodded, offering a gentle smile. "It's nice to meet you both properly, Sophie." He hesitated for a moment before asking, "Can you tell me about the man in the other room? Is he—" Sophie's face fell, her eyes filling with tears. "That's my grandpa, Thomas. He passed away 2 days ago. I didn't know what to do, so I moved him to the other room." Arjun was startled, picturing the girl's small frame straining desperately to move her grandfather's lifeless body to the other room. He wanted to ask her about it, but paused, recognizing it was hardly a suitable question. Instead, he allowed himself to assume that perhaps her grandmother had somehow helped, choosing to be content with that thought. "You've been here alone since then?" he asked gently. Compassion washed over him as he realized the full extent of Sophie's situation. Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I've been trying to take care of Grandma. She's been so sick, and I didn't know who to call for help." "And the pizza?" Arjun asked, gesturing to the box Sophie still clutched. "How did you manage to order it?" Sophie's eyes darted to a small pile of items in the corner, old jewelry, knickknacks, and a few electronics. "I've been trying to sell some things," she explained. "I found a little money and Grandma loves pizza. She's been asking for it, and I thought it might make her feel better." Arjun's mind flashed back to the phone call at the pizza shop. He turned to look at Evelyn, who let out a weak cough. Suddenly it clicked. "Your grandmother. She was the one who called the pizza shop earlier, wasn't she?" Sophie nodded, looking surprised. "Yes, she insisted on calling herself. She was having a good moment, and I thought maybe things were getting better, but then she started coughing up blood, and I tried to clean her area with bleach." Arjun gave her a gentle nod, understanding dawning on his face. "That explains the gloves and the stains on your clothes earlier." Arjun felt his heart breaking for this brave, resilient child who had been carrying such a heavy burden alone. He knelt beside Sophie, his voice gentle but firm. "Sophie, you've been so brave, but you don't have to do this by yourself anymore. We need to get help for your grandmother, okay?" Sophie looked at him, a mix of hope and fear in her eyes. "Please, no police, no ambulance, they'll separate us. Please, sir, no." Arjun met her gaze, his voice calm and reassuring. "Sophie, I understand you're scared, and I promise I'm here to help. But sometimes having professionals can make things easier. They're trained for situations like this. I'll stay with you the whole time. No one's going to take you away. We'll make sure you're safe and together, okay? Trust me, you're not alone in this." "You promise?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Arjun shook his head. "I promise I'll do everything I can to help both of you. But your grandmother needs medical care that we can't give her here. Pizza and warm compress will not sustain her. Will you trust me to call for help?" After a moment of hesitation, Sophie nodded, her shoulders sagging with relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. Arjun gave her a reassuring smile as he pulled out his phone, knowing that the next few hours would be crucial in changing the course of Sophie and Evelyn's lives. With a deep breath, Arjun dialed 911, his fingers trembling slightly as he pressed the numbers. As the phone began to ring, he saw Sophie tense up, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. 911, what's your emergency?" The operator's calm voice came through the speaker. Arjun quickly explained the situation. the elderly woman in need of immediate medical attention, the deceased grandfather, and the young girl who had been trying to care for them both. He gave them the address and stressed the urgency of the situation. As he spoke, Sophie's face crumpled with worry. "They're going to take me away, aren't they?" she whispered, her voice quivering. Arjun covered the phone's microphone and turned to Sophie. "I promise I'll do everything I can to keep you with your grandmother," he said softly. "But right now we need to focus on getting her the help she needs. Can you be brave for her a little longer?" Sophie said yes, taking a deep, shaky breath as she wiped away the tears trailing down her chin. She stood and walked to the washroom, and soon the sound of running water filled the quiet space. Arjun offered her a small, reassuring smile as she reappeared, then refocused on the phone. "Yes, I'll stay on the line until they arrive," he confirmed, following the operator's instructions. The next few minutes felt like hours as they waited for the emergency services to arrive. Arjun stayed close to Sophie, guiding her through small but comforting actions. He helped her apply a warm compress to her grandmother's forehead, hoping it might ease her discomfort even slightly. When Evelyn coughed up more blood, Arjun reached for a cloth and wiped her mouth, murmuring soft reassurances to keep Sophie grounded. A moment later, Evelyn began to vomit again, and Sophie's face twisted with panic as she moved to help. Arjun stepped in, guiding Sophie to take a breath while he carefully cleaned up the mess and disinfected the area. His calm presence gave her a bit of stability amidst the chaos, allowing her to focus on her grandmother without feeling overwhelmed. As they worked side by side, a silent understanding passed between them, an unspoken promise that he would stay by her side through this. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced the heavy air, growing louder as they approached the house. Sophie's grip on Arjun's hand tightened, and he gave it a gentle squeeze. "It's going to be okay," he reassured her. "They're here to help." As the paramedics and police officers entered, the once quiet room quickly filled with the bustle of activity, making the small space feel even more cramped and overwhelming. Sophie pressed close to Arjun, her fingers gripping his arm tightly as she watched the medical team examine Evelyn with swift precision, speaking in hushed but urgent tones as they prepared her for transport. In the other room, another team moved with equal care, gently lifting Thomas's body onto a stretcher, their movements solemn and respectful. Arjun kept his arm around Sophie, offering a steady presence amid the chaos, whispering soft reassurances as she watched in silent, wide-eyed shock. A kind-faced police officer approached them, kneeling down to Sophie's level. "Hi there," she said gently. "My name's Officer Martinez. Can you tell me your name?" Sophie looked up at Arjun, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm Sophie," she said quietly. "Is my grandma going to be okay?" Officer Martinez smiled reassuringly. "The paramedics are going to take very good care of her. They're going to take her to the hospital where the doctors can help her feel better. Would you like to ride in the ambulance with her?" Sophie nodded eagerly, then turned to Arjun with a questioning look. "Will you come too?" she asked, her voice small and pleading. Arjun hesitated for a moment. He glanced towards the front of the house where his motorbike was parked, remembering Gerald's warning about the rough area. The thought of leaving his only means of transportation unattended in this neighborhood concerned him, but as he looked back at Sophie's imploring gaze, he felt an undeniable pull to stay with her. In that moment, Arjun made a decision that would alter the course of his night, and perhaps his life. Pushing aside his worry for his bike, he nodded to Sophie. "Of course I'll come with you," he said, giving her a reassuring smile. Relief washed over Sophie's face as Arjun climbed into the ambulance after her. As they settled in for the ride to the hospital, Sophie began to open up, finally letting out the heavy burden she'd been carrying alone. "I've been trying so hard to take care of everything since Grandpa died," she confessed, her voice shaking. "I was scared to ask for help. I thought if anyone found out, they'd take me away from Grandma." Arjun listened with a heavy heart, realizing the enormous responsibility this young girl had shouldered. "Taking care of someone like that, it's not a small task," he said gently. "You've done so much, Sophie. It takes a lot of strength." As the ambulance sped through the streets, Sophie continued to share her story. She spoke of her absent parents. "My mother had run away with another man years ago and hadn't been heard from since. My father, Grandma once said that he had started a new family in the city and never sent money or support. I didn't even remember his face." Arjun held her hand, offering comfort and encouragement as she unburdened herself. The weight of Sophie's situation struck Arjun deeply. He realized how easily families like hers could fall through the cracks, forgotten by a system meant to protect them. As he listened to her story, he felt a growing sense of responsibility to ensure that Sophie and her grandmother received the help and support they desperately needed. As they neared the hospital, Arjun gave Sophie's hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze. "You've been incredibly brave, Sophie," he murmured, his voice warm and steady. "I'm so sorry you've had to face all of this alone, taking care of your grandparents, especially when they're so sick. It's not easy. I know that well. I'm going through something similar with my mother." He paused, letting his words sink in, hoping to ease some of the weight she carried. "It's a lot for anyone, especially someone your age, but you've done everything you could for them, and that's more than most people would be able to handle." Sophie looked up at him, a small smile breaking through her worry. For the first time since Arjun had met her, she seemed to relax, as if the weight of her worries had lightened, even if just a little. The ambulances came to a stop outside the hospital's emergency department, their sirens falling silent as the back doors swung open. A team of medical staff swarmed around them, quickly but carefully transferring Evelyn onto a gurney. Sophie watched anxiously as her grandmother and grandfather were whisked away through the automatic doors, disappearing into the brightly lit interior of the hospital. Arjun placed a comforting hand on Sophie's shoulder as they followed the medical team inside. The stark fluorescent lighting and antiseptic smell of the hospital were a sharp contrast to the musty, cluttered environment they had just left. Sophie blinked rapidly, looking small and out of place in the bustling emergency room. A kind-faced nurse approached them, kneeling to Sophie's level. "Hi there, sweetheart. My name's Nurse Jenny. Would you mind if I took a quick look at you while the doctors are helping your grandmother?" Sophie looked up at Arjun, seeking reassurance. He nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, Sophie. Nurse Jenny just wants to make sure you're all right." With a small nod, Sophie allowed the nurse to guide her to a nearby examination room. Arjun followed close behind, unwilling to leave Sophie alone in this unfamiliar environment. As Nurse Jenny performed a routine checkup, Arjun couldn't help but notice the signs of neglect on Sophie's small frame. Her pale skin, the dark circles under her eyes, and her slightly too thin arms. While the nurse worked, a woman in a smart blazer approached them, her demeanor both professional and warm. "Hello, I'm Sarah from Child Services," she introduced herself, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm here to ensure that Sophie is taken care of and to discuss the next steps." Sophie tensed at the mention of Child Services, her eyes widening with fear. Arjun quickly stepped in, his voice calm and reassuring. "It's okay, Sophie. Miss Sarah is here to help make sure you're taken care of while your grandmother gets better." Sarah nodded appreciatively at Arjun before turning her attention to Sophie. "That's right, Sophie. We want to make sure you have a safe and comfortable place to stay while your grandmother is in the hospital. Can you tell me if there are any relatives or family friends you could stay with?" Sophie shook her head, her lower lip trembling. "There's no one," she whispered. "It's just been me and Grandma and Grandpa for a long time." Arjun felt a pang in his heart, realizing how truly alone Sophie had been. He knelt beside her, taking her small hand in his. "Sophie, I know this is scary, but Miss Sarah and her team are experts at finding good places for kids to stay. They'll make sure you're safe and comfortable, and that you can visit your grandmother often." Sarah smiled warmly at Arjun's words. "That's exactly right. We'll do our very best to find you a nice foster family who lives close to the hospital, and we'll make sure you can visit your grandmother regularly." Sophie looked between Arjun and Sarah, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Promise?" she asked in a small voice. "I promise," Sarah said firmly. And I'm sure Arjun will check in on you too, won't you? Arjun nodded without hesitation. Of course. I'll visit you and your grandmother as often as I can, Sophie. You won't be alone in this. As Sarah from Child Services continued to discuss the arrangements for Sophie's care, Arjun's phone began to buzz insistently in his pocket. He glanced at the caller ID and felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. It was Gerald. Arjun excused himself and stepped into the hallway to take the call, noticing that Gerald had left over 10 missed calls. He took a steadying breath, preparing himself for the inevitable confrontation. "Where the hell are you? Are you lost or something?" Gerald's voice crackled through the speaker, filled with anger and frustration. "You've been gone for hours. Do you have any idea how many deliveries we've had to turn down because you disappeared?" Arjun took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm sorry, Gerald. There was an emergency." "An emergency?" Gerald cut him off. "What kind of emergency takes all day? You abandoned your shift, Arjun. You didn't inform me, and God knows where you left your bike. I've tried to reach you dozens of times, but you ignored my calls. This is unacceptable. I might as well report you for stealing the company's property." Arjun attempted to explain the situation, describing the dire conditions he had found Sophie and her grandmother in, emphasizing that it had been a matter of life and death. But Gerald was unmoved. "I warned you not to get involved," Gerald said coldly. "This job is about delivering pizzas, not playing hero. If you can't focus on the work, you're not suited for it." There was a pause, and Arjun knew what was coming next. "You're fired, Arjun. Don't bother coming back. Make sure you return the motorbike by evening, or I'll report you to the authority." The line went dead before Arjun could respond. He stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to his ear, a mixture of emotions washing over him. There was frustration and anger at Gerald's lack of understanding, but also a strange sense of relief. Somehow, losing this job didn't feel as devastating as it should have. As he walked back into the examination room where he left Sophie and Sarah, he found her sitting up, looking anxious. Sarah had stepped out momentarily, leaving Sophie alone. "Is everything okay?" Sophie asked, her voice small and worried. Arjun managed a smile, pushing aside his own concerns. "Everything's fine, Sophie. Just had to take care of something." He sat down next to her, realizing that this moment, being here for Sophie, was far more important than any job. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Sophie shrugged, her eyes downcast. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What's going to happen to me now? To Grandma?" Arjun took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "I know it's scary, but I promise you're not alone in this. Your grandmother is getting the care she needs, and Miss Sarah is going to make sure you're taken care of too." Arjun spotted a notepad on the table, pulled a pen from his pocket, and quickly jotted down his number. He tore off the page and handed it to Sophie. "Here's my number," he said gently. "Keep it safe, and if you can, try to memorize it. If you ever need anything at all, don't hesitate to call me. I'll just be a phone call away." Sophie looked down at the number, clutching the paper tightly. Arjun hesitated, then continued, his tone soft and sincere. "Sophie, I want you to know that even though I can't take you in myself, you're not alone. I'll be here to support you, and I'll visit you and your grandmother as often as I can, all right?" "Thank you, sir," Sophie whispered, her eyes wide with a blend of gratitude and lingering fear. "I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't stepped in." Arjun gave her a reassuring smile, his voice gentle. "Don't mention it. Maybe it was luck, or maybe the universe knew you needed someone," he said softly. "Honestly, I almost left to head back to my bike, but then a gust of wind kept that door from closing all the way, almost like it was inviting me in." He paused, watching her reaction. "So here we are, and I'm grateful for that small push that led me to you." Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes, and she threw her arms around Arjun in a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. As Arjun held her, he realized that losing his job was a small price to pay for being able to make a real difference in this young girl's life. As the late afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, Arjun offered Sophie a gentle goodbye. He explained softly that he needed to head back to retrieve his motorbike and tend to his mother, who was waiting for him at home. Sophie nodded, her eyes shimmering with fresh tears, reluctant to let him go. Arjun assured her once more of the phone number he had written down for her, promising that he was just a call away if she ever needed him. In the fading light, the neighborhood appeared different, less menacing perhaps, but still worn and neglected, with cracked sidewalks and empty, quiet houses looming in the shadows. When he reached 357 Willow Lane, his eyes scanned the area, searching for the familiar shape of his bike. But as he looked over the spot where he had parked it, a sinking realization hit him. It was gone, missing from where he had left it earlier. A surge of panic shot through Arjun as he scanned the area, his heart pounding. Losing his job had been hard enough. Losing the company's motorbike would be devastating. Thoughts raced through his mind about how he could explain this to Gerald and how he'd managed to pay him back for the lost property. Just then, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned to see the old man from the neighboring house stepping out onto his porch, a lit cigarette dangling from his lips. The old man took a long drag from his cigarette, exhaling a plume of smoke before nodding to Arjun, a look of understanding passing between them. "Looking for your bike, son?" he called out, his voice gravelly from years of smoking. Arjun nodded, relief and worry warring in his expression. "Don't worry," the old man continued, tapping ash from his cigarette. "I noticed it sitting out here after all that commotion earlier. Didn't seem right to leave it where someone might take it, so I wheeled it into my garage for safekeeping." Arjun felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. "Thank you so much," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't tell you how much I appreciate that." The old man waved off Arjun's thanks with his cigarette hand, leaving a trail of smoke in the air. "Ah, it's nothing," he replied gruffly. "I saw what you did for that family today. Not many would have stepped in like that. I, for one, kept my distance, got enough of my own troubles in my house, figured the least I could do was help you out." As the old man led Arjun to his garage to retrieve the bike, he continued to puff on his cigarette, the smoke curling around them as they walked. "I've been keeping an eye on that house for a while now. Knew something wasn't right, but, well, I'm old and I don't like trouble, you know?" Arjun nodded, understanding all too well the hesitation to get involved. "I almost didn't," he admitted, "but I'm glad I did." The old man patted Arjun's shoulder with his free hand as he wheeled the bike out, his cigarette still burning between his fingers. "You did good, son. Real good." Touched by this unexpected act of kindness, Arjun thanked the man again. He mounted his bike, started the engine, and took one last look at the Evans house, now eerily quiet and empty. The events of the day felt almost surreal in the dimming light, but the weight of Sophie's situation and his promise to her remained very real. Arjun steered his bike towards Frank's Pizza and pulled into the parking lot. He saw Gerald through the shop window, his face set in its usual scowl. Taking a deep breath, Arjun walked in, the bell above the door jingling softly. Gerald looked up, his eyes narrowing. "So you decided to show up after all," Gerald said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Arjun didn't respond. He simply walked up to the counter and placed the bike keys down. "I'm returning the bike," he said quietly. Gerald grunted, reaching under the counter. He pulled out a small envelope and slid it across to Arjun. "Your pay for the half hour you actually worked," he said coldly. Arjun picked up the envelope, feeling its meager weight in his hand. He nodded once at Gerald, then turned and walked out of the shop without another word. Outside, Arjun opened the envelope and stared at the small amount of cash inside. A laugh bubbled up from his chest, surprising even himself. Here he was, jobless and with barely enough money for a meal, yet he felt lighter than he had in years. As he walked down the street, Arjun thought about Sophie and her grandmother, about the old man who had saved his bike, about Gerald and his callousness. It struck him then how the universe seemed to balance itself out. For every Gerald there was a kind neighbor. For every tragedy like Sophie's, there were people willing to step up and help. The day had begun as nothing more than a pizza delivery, yet it had unfolded into something far greater, a profound life lesson. What could have been his biggest misfortune, losing his job, risking his safety, stepping into a stranger's troubled world, had instead become a turning point. It was the day he'd been given the honor of becoming an everyday hero. Arjun realized that even in the face of uncertainty, he would be all right. The world had a way of taking care of those who took care of others. The old man saving his bike while he was busy helping Sophie was proof of that. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Arjun found himself standing in front of the local pharmacy. He looked down at the money in his hand, then back up at the store sign. With a small smile, he walked in, ready to buy the medicine his mother needed. The automatic doors closed behind him, marking the end of this extraordinary day and the beginning of whatever tomorrow might bring.